Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Weyland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. Before we get into the show, let's jump into the warm-up that we do with every show. Tanner, in kind of going along with our theme of creating maps that I was talking to you about the show and building one-shots, you have the task, you're playing with your group and they want to go to this dungeon that you just made up. So now you have the task to populate the dungeon with at least three unique rooms in the dungeon. They don't have to be like breathtakingly unique, but they have to be somewhat unique in the sense of, wow, this is an interesting room of the dungeon. What would you put in that dungeon?
Okay, 3 unique rooms in the dungeon. Okay, for one room, it's a little mix of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade / what I'm planning for my D&D one-shot coming up here in a couple weeks. But basically, what they see is a treasure chest. First off, they enter into a large cavern. It's domed, kind of like rocky, as if it were hewn out of the rocks of this dungeon. And they enter, and they see a big floor that seems almost as if it's made of glass. It's shimmering in the light that's coming from a single hole in the top of the ceiling, and which is shining down, of course, classic, on a treasure chest. And so the whole key of this room is that there are different kinds of symbols or riddles. I mean, it could be either one. I'm going to say riddles because why not? There's riddles on the glass, and they essentially have to step on the right answer. If they step on, and there's going to be multiple possible answers. If they step on the wrong things, then they fall through, right? Mm-hmm. And they have a chance for, reflex save. So that's one room. Second room, I'm going to do a rope swing room, because why not? They walk in, they're on a platform, and then much like Luke and Leia before they knew they were siblings, they will either hug each other or just swing across. And will
there be snapping alligators in the water underneath, or?
You know what? For you, yes. You want snapping alligators, you get it. Okay, Justin?
Thank you.
And then the third room is going to be... You know what? The third room's going to be a little... it's going to be a little storage room that they walk into. And they don't think it's anything special. But then they see some baguettes in a barrel. They go over. One of the hungry players goes over, starts playing with them. One of the baguettes moves with a ka-chunk sound, and then it slides. The barrel slides across, and there's a ladder leading down. And in there's a little, let's say, gnome who's running a little mid-dungeon waypoint shop for them that they, of course, have to buy. But, yes, there you go.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yes, but thank you for the warm-up. I'm feeling fired up, thinking about baguettes and broken glass and everything. But, listeners, Dungeons & Dragons is evolving. Wizards of the Coast has come out with some major announcements in the last few weeks, and today we're going to talk about them. But first, we want to welcome you to How to Be a Better DM. I'm your host, Tanner Weyland, and here with my cohort, Justin Lewis, we're going to learn how to craft better stories for you and your players, so your DM sessions of D&D 5e, and soon to be OneD&D, will just be the best they possibly can be. You ready, Justin?
I am very ready. I'm stoked.
Perfect. First, though, cool your jets, Justin.
Cool.
Cool, nice. So first off, just some announcements. I'm running a one-shot September 17th at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. I'm going to be sending out an email today, so by the time you listen to this podcast, you should, you who are playing, you lucky few, you should have a link for that. And then otherwise, we're going to make sure that everybody else can watch it on betterdungeonmaster.com/watch. And you get to enjoy a good game of D&D. So then our next one-shot is on October 22nd. Now you're thinking, wait, Tanner, Justin, weren't you only going to do this every quarter? We were, until we got some help from friends. And we're still nailing down the time of this one shot, but we're pretty sure it's going to be October 22nd. And we'll send out later information later. Okay, so as far as it goes, once we send out that info for the October 22nd one shot, don't worry, we will be having another one shot for the final quarter. So get excited for that. As far as it goes, if you want to look at the Web of Waking Dreams, it's an original horror one-shot created by our friend of the show and guest host, Bone Daddy Rob, from This Dungeon is Occupied. So in order to find out more about this, go to betterdungeonmaster.com/one-shot and sign up today. Anything else worth mentioning?
Oh, yes. So big shout out to our listener. His name is Josh Hermansdorfer. He actually gave us some awesome feedback. I sent out a survey and he filled it out and he gave us some great feedback, and we wanted to extend to you the same opportunity to help create the show. You can have a stake and ownership in the show and help us in our commitment to give you ever better content. All you got to do is go to betterdungeonmaster.com/feedback, and you can answer as many questions or as few questions of that survey as you want. And if you don't want to put your name, don't put your name. It can be completely confidential. But it's just a way for us to really get a bead for how you listen to the show, why you started listening to the show, what you do like, what you don't like, what things you might change. And really just a way for us to, again, figure out what is the best possible way to serve you more.
Perfect. Love it. So once again, we really look forward to your feedback. And in the meantime, let's just jump into our topic today. So I actually pitched this idea to Justin because I was, on YouTube, as one does, and I saw the announcement by Wizards of the Coast. I believe that's who's in charge of that, yeah. And so they basically announced not a new edition. They made sure not to say that, even though for all intents and purposes it is. They basically are launching, well, first off, they're launching a playtest for essentially the next edition of D&D, which they're kind of almost phrasing, their marketing is essentially one D&D to rule them all, not that phrase, but essentially that they're like, oh, there's not going to be additions. There's just going to be one D&D.
Yeah.
And it comes with a few changes, right? Did you get a chance to kind of watch their little video that they came out with?
I did indeed. And One thing I will add is, so a lot of this, I believe, actually is possible because Wizards of the Coast, who created Dungeons and Dragons, they bought D&D Beyond, and they actually mentioned in the show, or not in the show, but in their kind of YouTube presentation announcing all of this, that some of these particular initiatives are only possible because of their merger with D&D Beyond. And to Tanner's point, they said in the video that 5e was built based on things that players liked or didn't like about previous editions, and they're trying to do that with OneD&D, but they're doing it in kind of, I guess they're following the format of major video games, rather than Fortnite getting a new edition. They just have patches come out and things change here and there, and new seasons come, and I think that's what OneD&D is really trying to mimic, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's kind of, I mean, for better or worse, they're essentially, my guess, switching to a subscription model, you could almost say. Yeah. Not necessarily for the content, because, you can buy books and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, just before we get into this, like, the nuts and bolts is that Wizards was coming out to announce it because, similar to many other kind of tabletop RPG systems, when they're trying to release a new edition, then they have a play test and they kind of throw all of their different ideas at the wall and they see what sticks. Now, the only other kind of recent one that I can think of or compare it to, another kind of similar system, Pathfinder, they did one for their second, edition of Pathfinder, and they did a play test, and people had all these different negative and positive thoughts on it, and then they came out with the official, like, second edition, right? And something that people didn't realize is like, oh, the playtest, actually, the feedback was listened to. A lot of the things in the playtest that people were iffy on, it got changed. And that's one thing I want to point out here. Right now, they've just released stuff for the playtest, which I believe you can find info on. Is that on D&D Beyond where you can get info? Yeah,
it's just right on the homepage. It's when you go to the homepage, there's kind of, at least last time I checked, there's like 4 boxes at the top, and the one, I think, third from the left is the OneD&D Beyond, or OneD&D playtest material, or at least the first batch.
Yeah, and so basically this is a great chance. They're kind of giving it to everyone to be like, hey, try it out, give us your feedback, and then hopefully their goal is to release the official OneD&D in 2024. So it's going to be a sec, and I'm interested to see how it goes, frankly.
For sure. And actually, that first batch of playtest material, we're going to dig into it and kind of talk about it on a separate episode. So I guess stay tuned for that. But one thing I would iterate, okay, 2 things I'll iterate, is one, it's going to be created on the foundation of 5e because 5e was popular. There were lots of things good going. There's going to be changes, and frankly, this is the second thing. If you, as a player, don't like those changes, then you can actually tell D&D, tell Wizards of the Coast, they have a survey, essentially, attached to the playtest materials, and you can say, hey, I like this, I didn't like this, and, just like Tanner said with Pathfinder 2, they're going to listen to it and hopefully change it,
Yeah, exactly. This is, frankly, I've been watching a lot of videos, commentary on OneD&D and their proposed changes, especially some of the rule changes. And people are concerned, rightfully so for some of the stuff. But, I think that Wizards of the Coast is right to, throw some of these, throw out some of these ideas. Because some of them I'm like, oh, this could be bad. But I don't technically know. We haven't had a chance to actually play with it. And so, I would say, first off, keep an open mind. And then, if you play with the new playtest material and your concern is realized, then, like, hey, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for your feedback. They're looking for any kind of suggestions you have. But, yeah, just kind of to move on and talk about some of the specifics here, you know, they've added a new race. They've made some significant differences to how races. I believe they're calling them backgrounds now, and like, which I think is like smart, you know, because like if you get a little too nitty gritty with each of the races and the sub races, you know, it just gets a little weird. And it's like, hey, let's just call them a background. And, you know, the different kind of races or backgrounds have different feats associated. And so that's kind of different, fairly different. And then there's, you know, changes to some rules like, how crits work. And also like how they categorize magic for the purpose of, for different, you know, classes and things like that. One of the big things, though, and Justin, you know, if you have any thoughts on this,
For sure.
they're releasing a virtual tabletop, like essentially engine for you to play games on.
Yeah. To be honest, again, that specifically was only possible because of their pairing with D&D Beyond, as well as also, in addition to that, they're now going to be releasing digital physical bundles, so you can get the physical books and the digital books, which is nice. But all of this is possible because they merged with D&D Beyond. Specifically for the virtual engine, I honestly think that is kind of a bid for staking their claim for tabletop role-playing games in the metaverse, I guess, if you can say that. So I honestly think this is them trying to say, hey, when virtual reality becomes even more prolific and ubiquitous, D&D is the thing to do, and you can play it just with anyone and your friends, you know. And I don't know how I feel about that. Like, Ready Player One was an awesome movie, but I'm also kind of scared of, like, society changing, but only time will tell, you know.
Yeah, you know, change is scary. It's okay,
Yeah.
Justin. It's okay. That, you know, honestly though, I hear that. For me, it's a little bit more of you know, initially I thought it was awesome, frankly. And I don't know if we want to go into this now, but basically the nuts and bolts is that it's made with the Unreal Engine, and so in their video it actually looks incredible, you know.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, I have concerns about if it will always look incredible. I don't know. But either way, it's like an upgraded version of Roll20, you could almost say, specific to Dungeons and Dragons. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things. Because, like, yeah, new rules, everything like that, that's big. Them kind of making a bid for, like you said, that kind of virtual reality / just like a new major competitor against Roll20 and these other online tabletop systems. It's a big news, you know. But so just for the listeners, we're planning on kind of talking about what they're doing and then later talking about our thoughts on it, just in general. But Justin, anything else that you think we ought to cover before moving on?
Yeah. So just kind of a heads up for those of you who might not be aware, they just released kind of not necessarily, well, it was part of this, but it was also like slightly before. They released Spelljammer, a whole kind of source book bundle, complete with monsters, new races, even some rules for space combat, I guess you will, if you will. And for those of you who are unaware, Spelljammer's kind of an old D&D setting which takes place in the Astral Sea. Like, essentially think of the movie Treasure Planet, and that is Spelljammer, right? That's the kind of adventures that you're allowed to do. It's D&D in space. So that's available now. I'm actually looking forward to get that for myself sooner or later. But also, they are releasing new resources for another D&D setting, which is the setting of Dragonlance, or the world of Krynn, which I have a fond place in my heart. I actually started reading Dragonlance novels before I ever heard of the Forgotten Realms. So, you know, I like all of those stories are near and dear to my heart. But one cool thing about that is they're also releasing a companion board game for the Dragonlance world that you can play in D&D, but this board game is supposed to help you play out kind of grand war scenarios, which, to be honest, I always thought that war was kind of something that was pretty difficult to do in D&D, so I'm excited to see how this works, and I'm hopeful that the Dragonlance resources don't require, and they already said they don't require the board game, but I'm hopeful that the resources themselves for D&D will allow you to simulate grand conflicts like war easily, even without the board game, and just having the board game makes it a little bit more fun, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that these things are coming out still because, I don't know, sometimes when other companies have moved on from one product, essentially D&D 5e in this case, right, onto OneD&D, I'm always worried that they'll kind of abandon their old one, and I still think that's coming to some extent. But it's nice to see that they're still releasing that right now. Like Spelljammer, I think that's just classic, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Treasure Planet. I think everybody would be, remiss if they didn't play a campaign set in a very Treasure Planet-esque style and play that one song that everybody knows from that movie, you know the one.
I do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. But yeah, honestly, take a look at it. Wizards of the Coast are doing a lot of cool things right now. But first off, let's talk about opinions and everything. But first, I believe you got a continuation to the warm-up, right?
Yes, I do. So, for this dungeon with these 3 very interesting rooms that you have just made up on the fly, what would you say is kind of not the core, but like the mystery at its center? So either what's the big boss or what's the treasure that they're looking for? Like, what's the purpose of this dungeon?
Okay, purpose of the dungeon. The purpose of the dungeon, you know what? I'm going to say that the core of this dungeon is a disappointed child.
Ooh.
I know, right? Wait until I figure out what that means. No, I'm just... I'm thinking about it. I'm like, okay, swinging on ropes. Every child's fantasy.
Yeah.
Walking, like, where would you hide something from a child? Across a thing of glass where they could easily fall,
Yeah.
And what do kids like? They like when people buy stuff for them. And so essentially they're going through this dungeon and they little by little realize the story in the murals on it that this dungeon was created by a super powerful being who, actually a super powerful being's child who had been born and then bereaved of their parents, but the child was also like galactically powerful and like had great arcane powers and essentially molded, their desire for love, for care, for gifts, everything kind of molded into a dungeon, and these players stumble upon it, and little by little, they can either learn what it's all about and try and show that child love by bringing certain gifts that they found, or they could just try and attack the child and see how that goes and see if they can, basically take down this super powerful, childlike creature.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I have for now.
Dang, that was really good. Have you seen Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, what you just described made me think of that giant baby person. That's the son of the witch.
Exactly.
Dang, that's a freaking cool dungeon. I hope you flesh that out soon. So, anyways.
Yeah, that's the next one. That's Dungeon of the Crybaby coming in hot.
I love it. So I think we're talking about our opinions on what Wizards of the Coast is doing now, right?
Yeah. Is there anything you want to start with? Because I'm interested to talk about the virtual tabletop. along with some of the rule changes and things like that. But
Yeah.
do you have anywhere you want to start?
Actually, let's start with the virtual tabletop. I want to hear what you think, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
Okay. Virtual tabletop. Some people were saying, so one guy came at it from a video that I thought was very interesting. I was like, okay, I see his point, but I also disagree. His main point was like, oh, there are 2 reasons why this is bad. One, that they're going to charge like a subscription essentially to use this service, right? Much like Roll20, they have an upgraded version that you can pay monthly for, right? And he's saying like, hey, they're doing all this stuff on Unreal Engine. That's not cheap, so they're going to put in that time. His second point was that like, oh, people become less imaginative. They'll kind of do adventures that you are able to do within the virtual reality versus kind of doing some theater of the mind and some other stuff. And I mean, I partially agree with him, Like, for example, in terms of the cost, I do think that this is going to be high quality. But as a person who, growing up was constantly trying to find workarounds for things with subscriptions, I played Guild Wars online because World of Warcraft had a monthly subscription. I tried to find like free content online when I was creating, campaigns essentially for D&D, like free pictures and stuff I could put in instead of buying the actual thing on Roll20 or D&D Beyond, like. From that point of view, I'm like, yeah, I think that's certainly concern, about affordability there, because it's certainly not going to be free, nor do I think it should be free. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
So as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about like various pricing models. Everything that, D&D Beyond has done so far has been, there's a freemium model, so free, and then you can pay to upgrade, and that seems to be kind of standard across the D&D market, Roll20, for the most part. So I could see that this virtual engine, this virtual tabletop game, is kind of the premium model. But then I also thought, like, that's not going to be cheap. That's going to be a subscription. I thought about all those DMs out there who spend, myself included, spend time and money creating or building tabletop minis, and you can play the game for free essentially, but you get those minis to augment the game. And I thought back to the video that they showed in the Wizards Presents video, and one thing to note here is that they didn't say that this OneD&D is going to be ready next year. They said it's going to be ready 2024, which means it's at least a year and a half away, probably more in my opinion. I don't think it's going to come out January 1st, 2024, which means I think that they showed kind of, to be honest, this is what I think, that they showed a video of what it could look like, not necessarily what it does look like, and they've assembled, so I could easily see them offering it for free, especially because either you're going to need some sort of virtual reality equipment or you just have it on your computer, but then you have to pay to get certain minis that you can use in the virtual tabletop, because the video they shared wasn't, you with a character fighting these things. It was you looking at a tabletop, with minis and everything, and much like we'd have it at a normal table. And I think they want to preserve that. So I could see them going either the subscription route or, you pay for different terrain pieces, minis, things like that, much like you would do in normal life. And with the world of NFTs, that's not impossible. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I kind of expect that it's going to be like that, right? Like there's probably going to be some. I mean, it would be a bold move if they just make the entire thing free, but like basically make it so that the content, or the minis, the actual like pieces and everything are behind a paywall. That's an option. In terms of the creativity aspect, I hear that, that like, oh, if this thing comes out like a metaverse or whatever, then some people might feel like, oh, we like it's not really D&D if this isn't the thing. And frankly, I don't like, I think that's a little bit, like fear mongering in terms of like, oh,
Curmudgeon-y.
people get, curmudgeon-y, where it's like, hey, things are, if it gets so good, then people won't want to go back. And I'm like, I mean, people will do what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But
I think, like, we just had COVID-19, right? A lot of people went to playing D&D online, and then the second they were allowed to, or whatever, they went back to playing with their friends and family. Because, like, as much as we do like the convenience of being able to talk over, Riverside like we are, we do like being in the same room. We get a lot more sights, smells, sounds, feelings even of just being in the same room. I am curious, though, because all of science fiction points to the fact that humanity will devolve into more of a, luxury and, what's the word? Like, they do whatever's easiest. And so I'm
indolent
exactly.
is probably the really fancy word for it, yeah.
So I'm curious to see, but, the doubter inside me says the tech isn't there quite yet. And, I mean, we all have to go to work, or we all have to exist in real life. So I think we do prefer those real life experiences right now. But there's only time will tell,
Yeah, and it's not, like, in a way I'm like, oh, it's cool that someone's essentially taking Roll20 and making it, like, the next step, which is kind of triple A-ing the whole thing, right? By making it so you can look at the computer and it's like, oh, high definition minis and everything, right? And you can build dungeons, because right now you kind of have to go to other places to find tools that you can do that with, right? And I'm like, it would be cool if they did it all together, and if they had some real money, which they do. Like, that's the thing that's I kind of like here. As much as I personally don't love when certain things get monopolized, like social media, by like Facebook, metaverse, whatever you want to call it, right? I do appreciate when like a company with a lot of money gets to essentially throw like that money at a problem and see if it solves it,
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, in terms of taking the virtual playing of D&D to the next level, we'll just have to see how that works. I think that this is a big step forward that way. And then hopefully hopefully they come up with some ideas that other creators can kind of riff off of,
For sure.
But other than that, have you had any thoughts about any other changes with D&D, with OneD&D?
Yeah. For one, well, and actually, kind of going to your previous point, one thing I do want to note is that the D&D movie, or the remake, or the next D&D movie, however you want to call it, is coming out, I think, in next year, which should hopefully be a nice shot in the arm for D&D as a whole, and hopefully flood some money in for some of these projects to make them so that even if the idea is terrible, that the tech doesn't suck. But one thing that I'm still not like is the kind of changing of the backgrounds, races, feats, and all that. So basically, my thought process with the races is, it was kind of cool to be able to choose to be a Dragonborn because you get these certain buffs and flaws and crap like that. But they've somewhat changed it so that way, no matter who you are, your stats change based on how you want them to change. So it's not based on race. And the only thing that you get from your race are specific racial features, which I guess makes a lot more sense. But it kind of, like, the whole trope of dwarves being somewhat hardy and strong, you can still choose that, but now you're going to see a lot more dwarves that aren't that way. And to me, it's like, how can you have interesting exceptions to the rule if there aren't rules anymore, And maybe that's me being a curmudgeon. But I think we're going to see a lot more exceptions to the rule, which won't be as interesting because, there's not that trope of every dwarf is strong and hardy, but instead certain dwarves are smart or fast or whatever. I just, again, I worry that maybe the creativity won't be there because everyone will just be able to do whatever they want, which sounds like it's more creative, but I don't know. One thing I do like, though... go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was reading some of the playtest material, and we'll go into that a little bit more in another episode, but one thing I do like is that there aren't really sub-races anymore. They call it legacies, and they've actually added more legacies to certain races. Tieflings, for example. And the legacies also have not just a physical effect on your character, but also a mechanical effect based on like the legacy you receive from your ancestors and things like that. I do think that is a really cool concept of, you're a tiefling, but this one's an abyssal tiefling, so they get various boons from their demon blood, and this one's a infernal tiefling, and they get various boons from their devil blood, and they're different. And I think that does make it a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, I think that I think some of the things they're doing is the groundwork for like an interesting change in how you approach, creating a character, because with their inclusion of, hey, we're going to, instead of doing the whole mechanical changes, we're going to do feats. They're essentially being like, hey, let's not put each type of race in a box. And to that point, I'm like, you know what? I get that. Like, it's nice to be like, hey, if you want the typical orc, just distribute your points accordingly, know. However, if you want an orc who's a scholar and everybody's like, oh, fie on you, and he's an outcast, then it's like, oh, at that point you can, make them, respec them in a different way. Yeah. But they still have those same feats. And then, like you said, the lineages or legacies, those are just nice ways to, just to differentiate them a little bit more like the old system, but I think they've just slimmed it down. And one thing that I thought was interesting is that, one thing I've noticed about D&D 5e, there's a lot of homebrew content or other content out there for, different kinds of races, right? Or in, but they have, like, in terms of the core races, they keep it pretty simple, pretty tight, I would like to say, right? And this time they're adding one race, and it's just funny to me that, it took them this long to do it, and I'm like, and they added a race that I don't know. It's like, it's a very interesting poll. Like, so they added something called Ardlings. Yep. And in case anybody's wondering, that's essentially, tieflings. They're kind of like demon spawn kind of dealios. Ardlings are the opposite. They're more angelic. And same as how the tieflings now have three legacies or lineages that they can kind of branch out into. Same for the Ardlings. It's like, oh, they have these three different types. And there's actually, like, because previously there was a different kind of essentially angelic race in D&D. And it's kind of funny that instead of going with that one, they just went with a new one called Ardlings. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought the same thing too. I do like their description of Ardlings. It makes me think of kind of the Egyptian gods, how, they're the bodies of a human, but their heads are animalistic. And to me, that's very interesting. It's different and it's unique. I do wonder, though, why they didn't just say, ASMR are these, and sometimes they have the heads of humans, sometimes they have the heads of animals, and, these are... I don't know. I don't know why they went completely left field,
I know, because ASMR already exist, right?
Yeah,
and they're essentially that equivalent of, a celestial thing. And I'm like, you know what? Good on them for, like, at first I thought it was weird, and I still think it's a little weird that they didn't just canonize ASMR in a more real way.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what? Good on them for being creative. And like you said, the description's very interesting where it's like, oh, they're part animal, which frankly speaking, that's more in line with a lot of ancient religion, like texts for how they describe angels and things like that, right?
Right.
Even in the Bible, there's like wings for days and eyes and everything else, right? And it's like, you know, that's probably closer to what things would be angelically, celestially speaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have to see. I think that people were like, oh, that's weird that you came up with a whole new race instead of just, you know, sticking with ASMR. But, you know, I think good on them for being creative.
For sure. For sure. I think the last thing that we can really riff on is the crits. So they are changing how crits work. Crits now, so natural 20, automatic success, natural 1, automatic failure, and there's some other rules on that. So like, let's see, no monster / DM crit attacks, and magic attacks don't crit, but physical attacks do. Is that right?
Yeah. So like, people are up in arms about this, and this is where I really want to emphasize the playtest part of this. For example, because in the past, technically, only like with attacks would like a natural 1 or a natural 20 like do that, you know, where it's like, oh, you fail regardless of your modifier, and you know, or you succeed regardless. But skills, that wasn't the case, right? You weren't supposed to be able to crit either bad for better or worse on a skill check. You just weren't. It was supposed to be like, hey, still add your modifier and see if it works. But people were naturally already kind of treating it the same as attacks, where they're like, oh my goodness, you got a natural 20. So what if, you know, in order to succeed, you needed a 25? You got a natural 20. Like, you know, that's good enough. And to that point, you know, some people are mad about that. For me, I'm like, I was the kind of person who, especially if I'm playing with someone who's new to D&D, I'd throw them a bone. I'd be like, oh my goodness, natural 20. Yeah, you did it. Great. Awesome. Let's be creative, you know? But so I don't have a problem there, but I understand what people are saying. Like, oh my goodness, the crits, like you can't just naturally win on skill check. I don't know. Yeah. No.
One thought I had on that is I wish that, and maybe I'll treat it this way in my personal games and kind of play test it that way, but in treating crits and stuff, I think I'm going to start going that whatever the DC is, they have to beat that. If they roll a 1 or a natural 20, that doesn't necessarily mean they succeed or fail, but let's say they roll a natural 20, but the DC is 25 and they get a 24. I'm going to say you fail just barely, but something amazing happens. What amazing thing happens that does not make you succeed? And kind of steal that same type of idea from the Fantasy Flight Star Wars Genesis game, where if you roll a triumph or a despair, you know, something amazing or something despicable happens that is somewhat related, but it's also kind of out of the blue. I think that might be a good way to do that if you're really still not interested with the natural 20, natural 1 automatic success failure model. But like Tanner said, play test this, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And so on that note, there's plenty more we could talk about. We're not going to today. We'll talk about it later. But in the meantime, get out there, get playtesting. I think you'll be happier with the end product if you do. And, you know, until then, let's all roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.Rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
We also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action,
Shoot one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
drama,
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
and stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.